When I was 14 years old, I saw Karen Carpenter playing drum set on TV, and I said to my mother, that's what I want to do. And she said, oh honey, the drums are for boys, stick to your tap dance. So I didn't get a chance to be a drummer when I was a young girl, but I did stick to my tap dancing. And I went off to art school, majored in art, and I moved into New York City, got a loft in downtown, and started making art and living the life of an artist. And one day I saw a poster that said, learn Afro-Cuban drumming. And I signed up for that class. And I began to study that system of drumming on a conga. And it was very exciting, I loved it. And one day the teacher brought in another drummer with him, and he had a small tambourine, a Brazilian pandeiro. And they did a little duet, and the Afro-Cuban teacher said, this is Glenn Velez, and he teaches tambourine. And this is my last class, I'm moving to California. So I took Glenn's telephone number, and I didn't call right away because I liked what he was doing, but I liked the bigger drum. I wasn't all that taken with the tambourine at that point. But then I saw Glenn give a concert, and he played all these amazing frame drums and tambourines and frame drums without jingles, and I talked him into giving me lessons afterwards. And he had also played a doumbek, which is a Middle Eastern sort of hourglass-shaped drum. And I asked for lessons on that because I thought, well, that's closer to what I was already learning. And when I showed up for the class, he said, I've got some bad news. I dropped the doumbek, it was ceramic, and it's broken, and he stuck a tambourine in my hand. And that's how I started on this path of learning about the world's oldest known drum, the frame drum. Within a couple of years, I was performing and recording with Glenn, and eventually I started to talk about the ancient history of the frame drummers at the end of our concerts. And many women would come up to me afterwards and ask if I would teach them. So quite quickly I found that I had 50 students a week. And it was a very exciting time, and out of these students I formed a group called the Mob of Angels. And we did ritual concerts on the solstices and the equinoxes, and we would redo rituals like Valentine's Day by reading ancient poems of Inanas. It really became quite a phenomena, and we had a very large following in Manhattan. People kept going, you should be in California. But it was a very potent and powerful time. And as people, particularly women, but as people saw a group of women drumming, it just attracted more and more and more women to the frame drum. When I started studying with Glenn, he had collected about 200 slides of the ancient frame drummers from the Mediterranean world. This is the world's oldest known drum, and a frame drum is a drum that is much wider than the depth of its shell. And all over the world we find frame drums. It's like an archetypal idea. People everywhere come up with the idea to make a drum like this. What I noticed in his slide collection was that almost all of the drummers were women. And this is from about 5600 BC in what is now Turkey to about 400 Common Era. And I thought, well, what was going on that all the drummers were women in the ancient world? So I started to research these images that he had collected and tried to figure out who these women were. And it turns out a lot of them were goddesses or priestesses of these goddesses. And I didn't know anything about them. I knew a little bit about Aphrodite because we use her to sell lingerie and chocolates, but I had never heard of Isis or Hathor or Sekhmet or Inanna or Anat or Ashtoreth or Cybele, Demeter or Persephone. And I had to start studying the information about these different goddesses to figure out why they were holding frame drums. So I started to paint the symbols I found on the drum heads. Many of them have lotuses or a dot in the center that I know as the bindu from the yoga tradition, which is the compacted, unmanifested energy of the universe before the first sound. A lot of the drums were painted red, the color of blood. I started to realize that the drum represented the first sound. The first sound that we hear in the womb is the sound of our mother's blood pulsing through her arteries. So that's why the drums were painted red, or that they had this bindu, that compacted symbol of everything before it comes into existence. The drum was actually their symbol of being the creatress of the universe. One stroke on the drum and everything comes into existence. I began to travel throughout the Mediterranean world, throughout the Middle East and North Africa, collecting images, photographing sculptures and temple walls and vase paintings, till I ended up with thousands of images of the ancient frame drummers. I traveled through Europe, visiting all the great museums and photographing the frame drummers in those collections. And today I have thousands and thousands of images of these drummers. And I've collected much information about who they were and what roles they played in their culture. And in 1997, I published a book called When the Drummers Were Women. And it was published in German. And next year it's going to be published in Dutch. And it was even published in Persian in Iran. And I'm hoping to have it translated into Italian, into Greek, and very particularly I want to have it translated into Arabic. So that's part of our big plans, is to continue getting this information out to women all over the world. And my big vision is that I want to create an online archive and create a community around that can help contribute the images that they have. I have the ancient archive, but we want to create an archive that also includes contemporary players, men and women, all around the world. What I found back in the early 80s was basically a lost history of a time when the women were drummers. And the importance of this is that when women see a woman doing something, they are inspired to do it. It's like when I saw Karen Carpenter. That was the key for me. I saw her drumming, and I knew that I could do that too. Even though I didn't get the opportunity to do it right then, it planted a seed, and it took some time before it came to fruition. But that is why this archive is important. It's a lost history that I spent 30 years of my life putting back together, and I hope to spend many more years adding to it and helping other people add to it and creating something that can inspire women and men all over the world. The fact that this history has been lost to us for the last 1,500 years means that part of ourselves has been lost for the last 1,500 years. So with it coming back into publication, this means a big part of ourselves is coming back into existence. One example of how these ancient images inspire contemporary women is found today on the island of Cyprus. This is the legendary birthplace of Aphrodite, and I found thousands of images of ancient frame drummers from Cyprus. And there's a whole chapter in When the Drummers Are Women that talk about these frame drummers from this part of the world. These women on Cyprus who have no drumming tradition today found the book and became so inspired that they brought me to Cyprus to teach them to play. This was back in 2004, and they have continued to study with me and other frame drum teachers, and they have recreated a living tradition of frame drumming on the island of Cyprus today. We need your help to do this. This is a huge job, creating the database of all the frame drummers and to create the structure, to create this online community. So we're hoping that you'll support this archive and help us bring it to everybody all around the world.